Jamie, friends, even in this dark, you look magnificent. I just want to start by saying, Hilary and everyone who's put tonight together, you know, sometimes politics is a life of many drawbacks, but tonight you've made sure that malnutrition is not one of them. Can you join me in thanking everyone who's helped us and served us so beautifully tonight? So my name is Byrne. I'm a Member of Parliament. I've been an MP for 10 years, and over the course of the last 10 years I've done all the great jobs in government. I've worked in the Home Office, I've worked for Gordon Brown in Number 10, I've worked for Alistair Darling in the Treasury. And when you do my job, you get to speak everywhere. You get to speak on doorsteps, you get to speak on street corners, you get to speak on stages, national and international. I've spoken in the bear pit of the House of Commons, and I've spoken on stages in Trafalgar Square. And yet tonight, this feels like the hardest speech I've ever made in my life. Because tonight, this is the first time I've ever talked publicly about being the child of an alcoholic. And it was a few days before the election, in May, that I was in a hospital in Harlow, where I've spent much too long for the last few years. And I was with my brother and my stepmom through the night and the early hours of the dawn, holding my dad's hand as he finally slipped away in the cold light of St. Joseph's Day, after a battle with drink that stretched back decades. And for me, I was then in a pretty brutal election fight, and centre stage was my somewhat infamous leaving note at the Treasury about the state of the books. And it was only really when we got the election result that I finally had the chance to mourn, and I all but fell to pieces. And I think those months were some of the hardest months of my life. And it was at that moment that I got on a train to Bristol, and I walked into Nacoa's offices, and I said that I wanted to help in whatever way I could the charity that helped me see for the first time in my life that I was not alone, that the way my dad wasn't my fault, and that there was help for people like me and for millions like me. And so tonight, Hilary, to you, your team, and to everybody here that supports you, on behalf of every child that you help, on behalf of every child's life that you have changed, on behalf of every life that you have saved, I want to say thank you. So my dad, he was an extraordinary guy. When he was at his best, he was charismatic, he was generous, he was an idealistic kind of guy. He was the sort of person who inspired me to be an idealist like him, to join the party I joined, to venture into the jungle of public life and to try and do whatever I could to make a difference. But for many of those years, he was fighting an addiction to alcohol that scarred me. And when the woman that he loved, my mother, died from cancer at the age of 52, it just sent him over the edge. And you know, that has an impact on children. And so I grew up with many of the feelings that so many of you will have grown up. I know what it's like to try and make yourself invisible at home because just what's going on around you feels so shameful and so embarrassing. I know what the chronic insecurity feels like. I know the codependency of supporting others, in my case my mum, who I often had to counsel from the tender age of 8. I know what the occasional beatings felt like. Occasional, I'm glad to say, in my case, but enough to make you feel insecure in the fortress that's supposed to be your home. I know what the hospital visits feel like. I know what the trouble with ambulances feel like. And I know what the sheer choking agony of worry feels like. Is he okay? Is he safe? Is he on the floor? Is he eating? Am I doing enough? Am I a good son? Am I obeying the commandment to honour my father and my mother in the way that I should? I know what that guilt feels like. Why aren't I there to look after him? I know what that debate in your head feels like as you ask yourself, where do my responsibilities stop and where do his responsibilities start? I know what that drive for perfectionism feels like, constantly soldiering, searching to try and make somebody proud of you. And I guess this kind of came home for me not long after I got into the cabinet. I was the youngest cabinet minister under Gordon Brown, and I got into the cabinet after just 4 years in Parliament. And I wanted my dad to see how I'd done, and I invited him to my magnificent office in the cabinet office, just overlooking number 10, overlooking Horse Guards Parade. And he was so drunk he could barely stand. And we just had to bundle him up and get him home as fast as we could. And I just felt so ashamed. And I realised that just as no matter how much I loved my mum, I couldn't save her life. No matter how hard I worked, I couldn't make my dad proud. And I just felt profoundly second best. And the people who helped me told me that the way to process trauma is to try and build an integrated picture of the past. Try and put together the good things and the bad things, try and put them together. The love and the hate and the light and the dark. And when you're the child of an alcoholic, the problem is that the colours seem so jarring. The pieces seem so sharp, it's impossible to try and put them together into a single picture to make sense of it all. And it is impossible to do on your own. And that is why Nacoa is so important. It is not just a helpline, it is a lifeline. So like everyone, I often get angry about all this, and I suppose what I'm here to say tonight is that it is not enough to get angry. We have got to get organised. And the final straw for me was when Charles Kennedy died. And you know, when Charles died, it affected so many of us in Parliament. But what just drove me crazy was the way that people just talked about his death and the way that he was fighting demons. And I just thought, look, Charles Kennedy was a great man, but he wasn't fighting demons. He was fighting an addiction. And we're not going to make progress with this debate unless we start normalising the conversation. But you know what? If we're to normalise the conversation, we're going to have to organise the conversation. Alcohol harm costs our country £21 billion a year. It is the third biggest public health risk after obesity and smoking. It hurts over 2.5 million children in our country. They're children who are far more likely to become alcoholics themselves, they're far more likely to suffer abuse, and they are far more likely to grow up with the kind of insecurity that so many of us feel. But friends, if we are to break the cycle, then we're going to have to break the silence. And my dad wasn't just an alcoholic. He was the child of an alcoholic too. And I struggled so much with what I wanted to say to you tonight, but because I worried that what I would be doing would be dishonouring his memory in some way. And I guess what I decided to do is to honour the son that became my father, to honour the little boy that became my father. That little boy who didn't have the kind of help around him, that didn't have the kind of help that Nacoa offered nearly 250,000 children. So, what I'm able to say tonight is that we are going to take our fight to the House of Commons. Because I want every single child of an alcoholic in this country to know that they are not alone, to know that their parents' drinking is not their fault, and to know that there is help at hand. I want their parents to know the damage that they do to their children through their habits. And I want to make sure that as a country, we have the right investment in treatment so that when parents reach for help, we know that it is there. Now, I know that in some ways this might sound like a bit of a revolution. But you know, I've been in politics long enough to know that every revolution starts with a few people in a room together. And friends, the people in a room together tonight are me and you. So, I am, Hilary, so proud of the work that you do at Nacoa. I feel very blessed that, unlike my dad, I knew that I walked together with others. Well, now it's time not just to walk together with others, but to march together with others. We couldn't change things for our parents, but we sure as hell can change things for our children and for every other child of an alcoholic in this country. And that is what I am determined to do. And thank you so much for your support tonight. Please stay with us as we take our plight and we take this fight to Parliament. Thank you very much, and please give Jenny.